questions that we're going to address. I'm definitely going to call on one person to start the conversation, but as we all know, the teams here work together, so I'm going to ask that you guys chime in as if you have anything else to add to the question. Starting with Chief Pimlott, biggest challenge of 2017 during the fires, what would you say that was?
Great, well, thank you. So, question, biggest challenge of 2017. I think from a statewide perspective, there was a lot going on throughout the state. Even prior to the peak of fire season, the state had experienced a catastrophic failure at the Orville spillway and dam complex in Chico in Northern California, which involved the evacuation of almost 200,000 people and engaged multiple first responders from throughout California to help mitigate ultimately that emergency. And from that, we really were into, again, what was one of the most challenging fire seasons in the state's history in terms of the number of fires, the conditions of the vegetation around the state. After 5 years of drought, we were critically dry. And so what we saw were an unprecedented number of fires, and we saw fires that were burning at intensities unlike we have seen in previous decades, and this is really becoming the new normal for California. And so it was just, again, responding to and addressing all of this throughout the year and putting firefighters to work throughout the year. It wasn't just one event. It was engaging firefighters across the state, all agencies, for the entire year on a variety of major emergencies.
Thank you. Chief Osby, would you like to add anything as far as the biggest challenge you guys have faced in 2017?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Chief Pimlott said, because this is year 7, so out of the last 7 years, we've experienced 6 years of drought, and then last year we had a record rainfall. But I think for some of the local chiefs, is for the state of California, we have probably the best master mutual aid system in the world as it relates to neighbor helping neighbor, but it's strained. I mean, we're busy, then some of us has financial challenges. So when we do have incidents, about a third of our requests for resources go unanswered until we get them in later. And for a local fire chief, the first several hours is important to try to keep a small fire from getting large. So what that means for myself or Chief Terrazas or Chief Lorenzen is that we have to draw down resources to a drawdown more than what we typically do, taking in consideration that when we have wildland fires, as an example in LA County Fire, we still get about 1,200 EMS 911 calls a day. So we may have half of our fire department allocated to a wildfire, but we're still getting those other 911 calls, which makes it very challenging for us to maintain our daily responsibilities.
Got it. So knowing that the different departments and counties work together, I'd love to just hear a little bit about each of everyone's responsibilities. So we can start with Mr. Terrazas and start by just talking about a little bit about overview of what you oversee, and then as it pertains to how you work with one another, and then we can go down the list.
All right, thank you for that. Can you hear me in the back? Yes, no? Test, test? Okay. I have the great honor of working for Mayor Garcetti. I am in charge of the Los Angeles City Fire Department. We have 3,500 firefighters, 106 fire stations. We respond to an average of 1,350 calls each day, and we take over 600 people to the hospital each day.
Wow.
So we have a huge arsenal of tools. We do have 6 helicopters, 5 fire boats, LAX, we cover LAX as well. It's a busy, busy city, and we have challenges every day. During brush season, that's just another challenge. And I'm happy to say that we work well together across the state, and especially our partners with the county. Chief Osby has another 3,500, so between our 2 departments, we have 7,000 firefighters. And we have to protect our turf. What I mean by that is when we're under threat, our first priority is to the people of our jurisdictions. And I'm very proud to say it's been working very well. I hope this year we're not tested like we were last year, but if we are, we're ready for the challenge.
Thank you. Darrell Osby, I'm the fire chief of LA County, and for the most part, what he doesn't cover I cover almost the rest of it in LA County. So we're a contract department. So my department covers all the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County, and of the 88 cities in the LA County, we provide contractual services to 58 of them. And then we have an air and wildland division and lifeguards. But like all of us here in this panel, we wear multiple hats. So in addition to being the fire chief, I also the chair of FireScope, and that's a statewide organization made up of volunteer, municipal, state, and federal firefighters that was formed from the late 70s. And then we had major catastrophic wildland fires in the 70s. And from that, we've learned the need to have an instant command system, common tools, common communications, agreements. So we meet on that periodically. All of us in this room meet on those aspects annually, several times a year. And I'm also a Region 1 coordinator. The state is divided into 6 regions. So I'm the Region 1 Master Mutual Aid Coordinator, which covers the counties of Orange County, LA, Ventura, San Luis Obispo, and Miss Santa Barbara, right? So when we have a major incident, then I work with those municipalities to the state to help coordinate mutual aid requests. So I think that as you listen to this panel speak today, in addition to our day job, we have an amazing relationship in relation to how we share resources and help one another.
And again, Ken Pimlott, the chief of CAL FIRE, and I think both Chief Terrazas and Osby said it very clearly in terms of our jobs are much bigger than just the responsibilities we have within our jurisdictions. As the chief of CAL FIRE, I'm responsible for, we have almost 7,000 men and women throughout the state. We're responsible for the 31 million acres of wildlands, predominantly private watershed lands throughout California. And to protect them certainly from wildland fire, but also wear a second hat as being the state's forester, and we're responsible, again, working with all of our partners in engaging in fire prevention, fuels treatment, all those things that help mitigate the impacts of wildland fires, both before they start and certainly after. But CAL FIRE is integrated with all of the departments. You've heard folks say, and you'll hear it again, that California has a system. It's all the fires, almost 1,000 fire departments in California, CAL FIRE being one. And we're integrated in our response to disasters. And for CAL FIRE, we're across California. We have 343 frontline fire engines. We have an aviation program, helicopters, air tankers, all the same assets you'll hear certainly from Los Angeles County and Ventura. But our responsibility is certainly to protect these watershed lands, but also more importantly is the people and the urban interface throughout the state. And that's where, as the chief said, we're relying more and more on our fire departments and our first aid or public safety responders throughout the state with the significant drought and the condition of the vegetation statewide, including here in Southern California. It's making our number of fires increase. We had almost 10,000 wildland fires in California last year, and these agencies are all responding to those statewide along with us. And we burned almost 1.2 million acres, including the federal lands here in California. So we're getting more fires, and the fires we're having are becoming more destructive. 46 people lost their lives just in the wildland fires last year between the North Bay, in the North Bay area, and here on the Thomas Fire in Southern California. So again, the challenge is fires are becoming more intense, and it's requiring more resources, and it's occurring year-round, not just in those peak months in the summer when we traditionally think that we have the worst fire season. We're getting wildland fires that all of these folks are responding to all year.
Ditto, I work for the chief, so. Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Lorenz, and I am the fire chief for Ventura County Fire Department. 32 fire stations and about 600 members of our department. And the reality is we hosted the dubious honor of having the largest wildfire in state history, the Thomas Fire, and it becomes so incredibly obvious how well we work together because we can't do it on our own. And none of us, even the largest of the fire agencies sitting at this table, recognizes that we cannot manage these large-scale wildland incidents all by ourselves. It really does take a village. And to that fact, my department is about 500 firefighters, and we had 8,500 firefighters in our county fighting the Thomas Fire at the height of the fire. So it's a testament to the incredible work that goes along in the state of California. As was already said, we have the single best mutual aid system in the entire country, probably in the entire world. And it really is a partnership.
Hi, my name is Captain Scott Kelly. I represent the other end of the spectrum because I come from a 3-station department with 47 members, but I was on the Thomas Fire, actually responded to John's house. That's how we met. I was the one on the fire engine protecting his house. So my duty, I'm actually on shift today. I work on a fire engine and a fire truck, and I'm representing the other end of the spectrum on how a city like Monterey Park, that's 7 square miles, can end up helping assist for Ventura County and Los Angeles County and everybody else.
Thank you, everyone. Actually, my next question is to you, Captain. As one of the first responders to the Thomas Fire, can you give a brief breakdown of your first operational period was like from start to?
So how the process worked is we got a phone or a dispatch from our dispatch center that said we had 15 minutes to respond to Santa Paula. We had 15 minutes to gather our bags, prepare for 14-day deployment, and meet up with our strike team of 5 other engines to start fighting fire in Santa Paula. Initially, that's where we dispatched. It's immediate response. It's a testament to how well the system worked because typically we get called out 8 hours later, 6 hours later, but we were thrown right into the mix fighting fire for the first 36 hours. It was one of the fastest moving fires I've ever seen, up to an acre a second. And if we think about that, a football field is a little bit over an acre. It's a football's length in just over a second. So it was brutal, but at the same time, the system worked well, and because of it, we were able to do our job.
What did, I'm going to direct my question to Chief Lorenzen. What did we learn from the Thomas Fire?
Well, so many things. So the fire started on December 4th, and as Captain Kelly was saying, he was initially dispatched to Santa Paula. It was interesting. I was there probably an hour after the fire started, and as he said, I have never in my entire 27-year career seen fire move so fast. It moved 15 miles from Santa Paula and into the city of Ventura in 3 hours. It was truly explosive. What we did learn is a number of things. We knew the wind was coming. It was red flag warnings. It was almost hurricane level winds, and we had staffed up, as had CAL FIRE and Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City in anticipation of this. I know we had increased our daily staffing by 87%, and what we learned is that it's incredibly effective. Did we stop the fire? No. It would have been impossible to stop that fire if you had been standing right there when it started. The winds were just, they were 60-mile-an-hour winds, relative humidities down in the very low single digits, and it was just, and 7 years of drought. It was basically the perfect storm. But what we learned is that a lot from watching the fires in the North Bay up in Santa Rosa, that evacuations couldn't come soon enough. And so in the first hour, we asked for 350 additional engines. In the first hour, we started making plans to evacuate the city of Ventura, which was unheard of. And then also what was so incredibly important is that our community, I think because they'd been watching what had happened in the state, they were so incredibly prepared and ready. So when the evacuation orders came, it's such an incredible, important partnership between fire agencies and law enforcement and the community to listen and be ready to leave. It's this whole concept of ready, set, go, and they were. When we asked them to leave, they left immediately, and because of that, we didn't have any civilian fatalities as a result of lack of evacuation. So as devastating as the fire was, it really went about as well as something like that could. So we learned a lot of things really from the Santa Rosa fires, and then we also had a lot of affirmation from our preparation and the collaboration with our partners to the north and south.
Would anybody else like to add on the learnings? Okay. So learning how, I know we're going to talk a little bit about how people can deal with warnings and how to prepare, but how does your team prepare any predictions for the CAL fires? I mean, let's talk to Chief Pimlott. Like, how do you guys prepare for predictions? I mean, if you are predicting a fire, how does a team prepare?
So again, has been talked about, it's very coordinated efforts that go on in California. And it's not just the response element that we've been talking about, but it's every day, statewide, we are together monitoring weather forecasts. We have prediction centers, one in Riverside and one in Redding. And the staff there, these are interagency facilities that monitor weather, and not just what we think that the wind and the humidity is going to be each day, but what impact it's going to have on the vegetation. And we predict that generally out about 7 days, but every day we're updating that forecast. And so when we get into conditions where, again, what occurred in the Thomas fire, where you have this prolonged, what we call a red flag warning, where humidities are low, winds are predicted to be intense, and then we know when our fuel conditions, our vegetation is critically dry, then we're able to move resources. We do our best to anticipate where we think the biggest threats are going to be, and move resources around the state to anticipate that. Folks are training every day. As Chief Osby said, through the fire scope, we are governing how we train. We are governing the standards by which we all operate under, radio frequencies, literally the kinds of fittings we use on our fire hose. All of that is coordinated, so it's standardized, because we don't want to go back to the past where fire agencies individually all showed up with different kinds of equipment, couldn't talk to each other, couldn't share the same equipment. Now it all comes together under one organization. If it's Chief Osby's jurisdiction, his folks are in command, and all of the folks that are responsible come together, and fire engines, whether it's regardless of which agency, they just plug and play. They know the system. It's because we train every day, we govern ourselves to the same standards. This is going on every day, well before the fire or the emergency occurs. But again, we're monitoring and we're tracking every day what the conditions are like. We get on phone calls, we plan. It's a very well orchestrated and organized event. There are resources moving around California as we speak in anticipation of aircraft are moving and flying. We support each other's fires. So it's a very well orchestrated, planned activity.
Wonderful. So hearing how CAL FIRE prepares, I wanted to understand a little bit, what precautions can folks take before the fire crews arriving to the scene? I mean, what can we all do to, in case, because we don't really think about it until it's actually happening, and then all of a sudden we have, how do we prepare? What can we do as folks?
I think what Darrell Osby again from LA County, and all of us would say the same thing. And for those that live in Los Angeles County and live in a wildland urban area location, then you've already should have received your declaration card that we're going to come out and start doing wildland fire inspections. And so we have criteria in relation to brush clearance and vegetation and the combustibles from away from your home. So you should have already began to do that. We're going to come out and do an inspection to make sure that you've done it. But how you can prepare yourself is, number one, to be fire safe, understand where you live, understand when we do ask for evacuations, to pre-plan, to know how to exit your community several ways in advance, not just wait till the last minute to do it. And then all of us on our website, we have a Ready, Set, Go program that talks to you about how to get ready, how to be set in relation to prior to an incident. If we say go, then go. As it relates to brush clearance, evacuations, how to have your personal belongings identified, and then when we ask you to leave. And I can just say that succinctly. We all prepare in that manner.
I think a lot of folks during a time of trauma, first thing they think of, obviously, to save their loved ones, and the second thing is naturally is, how do I save my home? What are or is there any precautions anyone can take in advance of that to how to save your home, and how to, if it is at all a possibility? Is there anything that we can do knowing that?
And there is. Mike Mueller, Deputy Director with CAL FIRE. I'm going to echo Chief Osby. Is Wildfire Awareness Week was last week, and what you're seeing is, we have these programs for preparing your home, Ready, Set, Go, readyforwildfire.org. But the chief and I talked, and we actually looked at the theme of Wildfire Awareness Week last week and saw the new normal is no longer new. We are in it right now. The unprecedented is now precedented. It's happening. We have to lean back onto our public partners, the citizens of California, and we came up with a theme this year that fire defense is really self-defense. You need to know that it's not if it's going to affect you, it's when it's going to affect you, and now's the time to prepare. It's not when you see smoke in the air. So again, the resources that Chief Osby mentioned, all of our departments have websites that you can access. CAL FIRE has an app you can get on your phone that will guide you through and get you prepared, but it's here. And it's not going to change, and we're seeing these devastating wildfires, and what we're doing as a fire service, if we're preparing, you absolutely need to be preparing, and this is, like I said, it's not if, it's when. Look in Santa Rosa, you know, who would have thought that fire would have jumped a 6-lane freeway, burnt down Walmart, Starbucks? I mean, it was in the middle of a city. And so that is the normal now. So those are the references and things that you can go to.
If I got to add to that, I concur with everything that's been said. If you live in the city of Los Angeles, you can register through Notify LA, and we'll send you a message, a text message, or we'll send you, it'll go to your house if you like, you get to choose. Beyond that, you can download an app called Pulse Point, and we recommend that if you live in a brush area, it's a free app. If we get dispatched in your neighborhood, you'll get an alert, and you'll know we're coming. So it's all about situational awareness and being prepared if that time comes.
Wonderful, thank you. What do we want the public to know about evacuation warnings? I've noticed that there's always different terminology used when you're issuing an evacuation warning. What are some key statements? I'm going to start with Chief Osby, this one.
You're supposed to start with PIMLOT. I think that it's important that as professionals, and we're all professionals here, when there's a mandatory evacuation, that means leave. I know that we've had situations where people have stayed because they live in a fire-prone area, and last time we were able to survive it. But like my partners are saying, this is the 6th year of a 7-year drought, and the conditions are extreme. I mean, for the firefighters that are out in the field, if our captain spoke longer, it sounds like a locomotive coming, or multiple locomotives coming at you. So we're in extreme fire behavior right now. And when we say evacuate, we say that because we want people to survive. I mean, unfortunately, we're in an environment where, you know, we protect lives and property. And in my jurisdiction 2 years ago, for the few fatalities that we had, it's because people elected to stay. You know, after we said evacuate, then when the fire got to their homes, they saw the fire behavior was way more extreme than they anticipated. They tried to leave, and it was too late. And so when we ask you to leave, it's really about saving your life. Your property will be protected by the firefighters. And if for some reason when you lose your property, that can be rebuilt. But we can't bring back life.
On the Santa Thomas fire, when we got dispatched to Santa Paula, we literally had to have an escort us through the gridlock traffic that could not move because everyone was evacuating at the same time. And it's, you know, that hindered our ability to get to the scene because evacuation, you know, people waiting to the last minute. So it's imperative across the board, you know, for me as a fire captain to be able to get to the scene for evacuations to take place early and safely.
Anyone else want to add? I'm from media, right? And so obviously media runs to any situation of when there is a disaster happening. How do the agencies, or how do your agencies work with media as it pertains to training for emergency response? And how do we, what are things that you guys are doing and they're doing to like maybe stay out of the way so you can do your job, but at the same time provide the coverage for the people? Is there anything you guys would like to share on that?
There is, and under my position as Deputy Director, it's communications is my program for CAL FIRE for our statewide agency, and then again, communicating daily with our partners. But the media, we go out, and the agency sitting up here, actually, and we go out and engage the media because we do, the media is an ally because it helps us get our message out. It has to be the right message, it has to be timely, and it has to be accurate. But also the media wants to come and they want to see the fire. And they can get in the way. So we've become proactive and actually gone to our media partners, be it a print or actual your traditional, what you'd say your local news networks, even to national and internationals, engage with them to explain to them how our system works, so we can actually get them the story we need to get out. Of course, they're going to show the homes and unfortunately the tragedy, but also the key messages. And so when we go out and train them, one, how to be safe, interact with our crews that are actually operationally on the ground and not getting away, but also where we can get them the timely message and use them as an ally and not just have them out there freelancing. So it's very, very important. And again, I'll speak for CAL FIRE, but we communicate with these agencies on a daily basis. We're all in it together. And as far as the media is concerned, there's only one fire department in the state of California. They have no idea most of the time how it's jurisdictionally broken down. So that's part of the education.
Thank you. There's a lot, I'm hearing that there's great internal communication among the different divisions and jurisdictions. When things get out of hand and you need to have communication to the state and federal level, like how do you manage those relationships so that if it's needed, you're able to tap into it? I mean, are you doing stuff in advance, or is it the day of, everybody's just conditioned to it?
I'd like to respond to that. Here locally, I'll text Chief Osby, or he'll text me, and we'll start the resources going right now. And we follow up with the bureaucracy sometimes that it takes to get the state and the feds involved. It does take a little time, but time is of the essence. So it's critical that we get our firefighters in place as quickly as we can, but simultaneously we're starting down the path to get the paperwork and all the approvals from higher levels of government.
So there's paperwork needed the day of, in the middle of.
There's paperwork needed for everything.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
In addition, a couple things. On June the 14th, we're all going to be meeting again. And we're going to have our Region 1, Region 6 annual meeting, and that's all the state, local, and municipal fire departments getting together to talk about the projected fire season for 2018, which we already know is going to be a drier, warmer fire season. That's already predicted. And then we're going to have a press conference. We're going to talk about this again. But in our meeting, we'll talk about all of our agreements, our mutual aid agreements, how we expedite the processes. It's a review so we can actually make sure that when we do request resources that it's done expeditiously. But just to echo what Chief Terrasa says, and I said this earlier, we all have an amazing relationship on this front table. So the initial conversation and dialogue, it may be a text or a phone call. Even for the Thomas fire, we talked to, it was Chief Lorenzen and me and Chief Terrasa about what resources we can provide that night. And we gave what we thought was appropriate, but obviously it wasn't enough. But we gave him a lot of resources, taking in consideration that we still had a fire weather the next day, and fortunately, we kept enough resources because the next day we had 3 incidents amongst ourselves in LA County, and so it's really a combination of texting, phone calls, and the state process in relation to requesting resources.
Well, if I could just, tag on to that, from the state's perspective, yeah, there are agreements, and as Chief Osby talked about, there's reimbursements, there's all these things that have to happen on the official front. But I will be very clear with you, we will not short resources anywhere, and we use every process, we use our relationships to get resources on the road, and then we'll catch up with the process. But in no way will we short or delay or deny these public safety threats. That's because of this relationship here. We all know each other, and this is a statewide, whether it's Humboldt County or San Diego or in between. We are always in communication, and we'll get resources on the road, and then work things through the process after that. That's because of the relationship. When you have the kinds of disasters we're facing, and as Chief Moeller said, the new normal is the normal. It's not new anymore. That's why we're looking at upgrading processes. We're looking at having a more efficient system so that we can catch up with the administrative part of it much more quickly, and we can ensure that as we get multiple disasters occurring at the same time, we can get resources, we can pre-deploy resources more timely and to the right places. All those are things we're looking to improve. At the end of the day, it's our relationships that are making it work for us now.
Maybe during this conference call, you can get other people's cell phone numbers and maybe minimize that paperwork for everybody. But I understand that you do need to track the resources, and it's wonderful to hear the camaraderie between the different districts. Who was that? Got some echo happening.
It might have been somebody. It might have been somebody calling for resources.
Are you doing this Facebook Live? What are we doing over there? So going to the overall, the forest management, et cetera, kind of refocusing our energy back to that question. How important, and I think this might be a question for Mike, how important is that management in advance? Like so to manage some of that, so that we can avoid any of this, if at all possible.
No, absolutely, and the chief can speak on this too. And again, I reference everybody sitting at this table because we all have wildland-urban interface. As you know, last week the governor issued an executive order as far as resource management, the forest carbon plan. That's how important it is to the administration. I can't emphasize enough the importance of resource management, meaning engaging in our forest lands to, one, help stop these devastating wildfires and protect our watershed that is so important, not only for the watershed, but unfortunately you saw the disaster in Montecito that happened after the mudslides. But this is so important to the state that the governor issued that, putting fire on the ground on our terms to, we call them understory burns or fire on our terms, going out and thinning the forest. You have to still remember the tree mortality is still, we have 129 million dead trees still in the state of California that we're still dealing with. So I can't emphasize enough. And then again, this isn't just fire on the ground. This is mechanical, going out and masticating areas, working with landowners, with corporate timber companies, and all being on the same page. Shaded fuel breaks around communities that are threatened. I can't say enough on the preface of how important resource management and forest management is.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that? And I'd like to, with your permission, I'm going to ask their permission. With your permission, I'd like to engage some Q&As from our audience, if it's okay with you. Yes? Sure. Great. Does anybody have any questions? Please come on up, and we'll get through as many questions as we can.
How does the command structure work once a fire starts? Does the local fire department maintain its jurisdiction, or does it move to, like, go up the line? I'm always curious, with all these fire departments coming together, how does that work?
That's a great question. I'll start by answering that question, since we saw it with the Thomas Fire. And we had our initial attack commanders that were there, and then within the first 2 hours, we quickly realized the extent and scope of this, and we called up CAL FIRE and requested one of their Type 1 incident management teams, and they mobilized. It takes them probably 10 to 12 hours in Southern California to mobilize and come in, and then they basically integrate us into their command structure and take over the fire. We do that because, again, it goes back to that thing where we recognize that we all individually can't take care of these huge incidents, and because Chief Pimlott brings a very, very large checkbook.
He just wants us for money.
Yeah, but other than his checkbook, because we do the same thing, it's unified command. As an example, when, like for my partner here to the right of me, LA City, when we have a fire that's affecting multiple jurisdictions, then we'll call it unified command. So whomever jurisdiction is affected by the incident, so in our particular situation it would be LA City, LA County, might be LAPD and the sheriff there. We'll unify, so basically we're connected to the hip, and whatever decisions are made in relation to mitigating the fire or the incident, it's a joint unified message and joint unified command structure in relation to how those incidents are managed.
Wonderful.
Thank you all for being here. You're heroes to me. My brother retired as a captain in the Orange County Fire Department, and the best friend my growing up years, father retired as a battalion chief in Los Angeles City. My question is about the participation in your process on the part of the public, and it's a bit of a confession on my part. A fire started in the hills behind my home, and sure enough, I jumped in my car to go see what was going on. Got there, looked around, and saw all the other people that jumped in their cars and drove to see what was going on. What is the fire community, if I can use that expression in light of your being here, doing about helping citizens to help you by staying out of the way? Classic example. I live around the corner from a fire station in the city of Los Angeles. And they're leaving there all the time, often, of course, on the paramedic runs, but at times fire. Is there any way, for example, to do things like have the fire department turn all the lights to red so that people don't pull out in front of fire trucks, which I have seen many times, or anything like that? I think that would be helpful to some of us to know what you're able to do, what you would hope to do. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you. I think we could probably all, chime in on this from different perspectives. From one perspective, I can tell you that obviously, as Chief Lorenzen said, actually everyone has said, the ready, set, go. That's the preparation and understanding about a wildland fire and its impacts to you and your home before the fire occurs. And the go part of that is the key part. It's not go watch the fire. It's, which we all want to do. I think that's probably why we became firefighters, because we like that part. But at the end of the day, it is go early. Go even before you're asked to evacuate. Leave when it's safe and orderly, and you can do that and leave the area. One of the things we've really been talking about, particularly since the North Bay fires, because there was so little time for residents to know and understand what was bearing down on them. It's really an awareness level that we need to raise ourselves to, no different than they do in tornado country or hurricane country in this country. And that's, they have shelters where people know what to do when a tornado warning goes off. When hurricane warnings are in place, folks know. The reality of it is we treat the red flag warning that was in place during the Thomas fire. The Weather Service issued a very public red flag warning. It lasted for 13 days, the longest red flag warning that we're aware of in history. Well, ultimately that can become white noise. People go, yeah, okay, it's a fire, there's bad conditions, it doesn't impact me. Well, tell that to the people in the city of Santa Rosa. There was a red flag warning in place that night, but people aren't equating the dangers of a wildland fire the same as they are, and we know, in these other arenas. And so it's really us working with our media partners to try to engage this public awareness that, no, when a fire is forecast, we don't know where they're going to start, but we know the potential is there. And how do we refine our weather forecasting and get public awareness to recognize this drainage you live in is threatened potentially if a fire starts, and here's what you have to do when the first warning comes out. And I think it's just really raising our awareness and action level through all the tools and treating it that way.
If I can just add on real quickly, because the reason you went is because you wanted information. And that's what we're always challenged with, is especially in this digital age, there's so much demand for information. Chief Terrazas mentioned it, the Pulse Point app, we all have it here. Download it. It gives you real-time information about what's going on. And then also follow your local fire department on Twitter. Those two things combined will give you huge amount of information. And then most importantly, before everyone goes, for those of you that don't have landline phones anymore, we can't reverse 911 into your house. So you have to go on and be proactive and register your phone with your local agency's thing. For us, it's VC Alert. These guys all have different ones. There's state legislation that's going to hopefully change that and make it an opt-out policy rather than an opt-in. But those are really big things that you can do to help us.
And I want to make a point that Chief Lorenzen, and I can't stress this enough, and it's one of my pet peeves, but there's a lot of community Facebook pages that you may have in your local community that kind of people put information on what they might hear on the radio. I can tell you, to echo Chief Lorenzen, follow either your local, your state websites or Twitter, because that's where you're going to